So, David Dunlap, welcome to You Don't Say Conversations with the Loquacious Tom Duane. He is, in my book, a rock star as a Times reporter, as someone who writes about and loves landmarks and loves New York City buildings and knows everything about them, even places of worship. And now he knows everything about the Times forever, which we'll talk about in a moment. And he was very mischievous about forcing the Times to print the word gay before it wanted to, which, by the way, the New York Times called me loquacious. That's why this is called the Loquacious Mr. Duane.
That must be accurate then.
Well, I can be loquacious. Sometimes I say, if someone's doing like a documentary or something and they want to know some history, I'm like, okay, you ask me one question, and then in a half an hour, you can ask me another question because I'll just keep going and going. So the first thing I want to say, just because it's a fun fact, you got evicted from the Biltmore. Well, first of all, I was shocked. What were you doing living in the Biltmore?
I wasn't living there.
Oh.
I was a reporter covering the story. We had heard that the owners of the Biltmore, the Milstein brothers, this is 1981. It's my first year as a staff reporter at the Times. I'm there on a weekend, and we get word that they are evicting guests at the Biltmore Hotel, right next to across from Grand Central Terminal, and that demolition crews are moving in on it. And so I am dispatched by the Metro desk to run over to the Biltmore to find out what's going on. And as soon as I identify myself as a reporter and start asking questions, some goons working for the Milstein brothers make sure that I'm back out on the street.
Well, often developers and landlords have goons, on the payroll. But technically, they should have been able to throw you out. If you're in the lobby, it's a public space. I mean, now it's different. After 9/11, it's all different. But then, you could go to the Biltmore and go to the bathroom if you needed to.
Well, what the Milsteins were doing they were converting the building into an office building, and they did not want to have the bother of going through the Landmarks Commission with any of the interiors of the Biltmore.
Oh.
So what they were doing, and this is also a familiar developer ploy, was demolishing the interiors over the weekend before the city had a chance to act. And it was described to me by those who'd seen it as pure vandalism. That is to say, workers just coming in with crowbars and smashing plaster fixtures and swags and medallions, and in essence just making it impossible to rebuild and to reclaim as an interior landmark. Exactly. It became quite a scandal. It was, in fact, Tom, my first bylined page one story was the demolition of the Biltmore, and I followed the story for several weeks. And the Landmarks Commission, Kent Barwick was then the chair of the Landmarks Commission. They came to visit to inspect the damage, and they concluded that there was nothing left to landmark. Well, the building became the New York office of the Bank of America, and so you can argue
it's a beautiful building, and landmarking usually makes, whether it's a building or a block or a neighborhood, it upscales it.
It's certainly you could make an argument that the Biltmore was not of great architectural merit, that its real distinction was in its interior, and the real thing that people remembered who used to go to the Biltmore was a clock that stood in the lobby, and it was a very ornate clock with, I think, two mythical figures flanking it with tails and curlicues, and traditionally you would meet your date under the clock in the Biltmore lobby. I'll meet you under the clock meant at the Biltmore.
Now, were you a homosexual already, meeting people under the clock?
I'd never met anyone under the clock, if that's what you're asking.
And you might have been a homosexual. Were you a practicing homosexual, or had you gotten enough practice and you were good at it by then? I'm sorry. You don't have to answer your question. That's the kind of quirky question you get asked here. I can't help myself. Well, 1981, you're a little bit older than me, but we're the same generation. But you're at the Times. Are you acting all butch and everything, or?
In 1981, I was desperately invested in ensuring that no one knew that I was gay, because I still saw myself on the track to some masthead position. I had joined the Times in 1975. This year's my 50th anniversary on the Times.
Wow.
As a clerk to James Reston in the Washington Bureau of the Times. And at the end of that year-long clerkship, I was told that there was no position open for me as a reporter. This was in the middle of a recession,
Yes.
and the Times wasn't hiring, and especially not an inexperienced fellow like me. However, I had design experience because I had worked for 2 years on the college yearbook, and I knew how to do graphic design, and they needed a designer to further this new concept of news graphics that had a lot of information embedded in them. And at the age of 23, I was made graphics editor. And then after a couple of years of that, I realized, hey, if I'm going to get on the masthead, I've got to have some reporting experience. I didn't really want to be a reporter, frankly. I was fine sitting at a desk at 229 West 43rd Street.
You took pictures too, though, didn't you?
I was also a photographer. In that same period, I took the photographs for Paul Goldberger's Guide to New York City.
Wow.
During the newspaper strike of 1978, which I'm sure you will
I was
remember.
working on Bob Abrams' campaign for Attorney General.
Oh, yes.
Paid staff press person, actually.
88 days without newspapers.
Oh, it was, there were these creepy little newspapers from some guy in the Bronx. It was terrible. It was for politicians. We needed newspapers. Well, I wasn't a politician then, but I got a job with a politician. So you struck.
I was locked out as a member of the guild, and at this point I'm 6 years in, and I realize I've got to get reporting experience, just to have tucked under my belt. Well, I became a reporter in the summer of 1981, and I never turned back. It was the greatest thing ever.
On the city desk, right?
On the city desk, and I never left the city desk. In fact, I've always been a Metro reporter at the Times, and the Biltmore was my first story. And then to your question about being gay, during the strike, I came out to a couple of colleagues, and in fact, in one case, I came out by going to bed with him.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it's sort of.
We've all done that.
Yes, and but in 1984, again, I'm still on the weekend. I'm assigned to room 9 now. That is the press room at City Hall. But I spend Sundays on 43rd Street as the duty reporter for politics and political related
So
stories.
I would call you and say, Bob Abrams is having a press conference.
and I would ignore you, and I would say,
No,
I'll do my best to be there.
You say, oh, we're doing Carrie. I don't know if we have an extra person because Hugh Carey was ready for re-election.
I'll tell you who was a pest was Schumer.
Oh, always. Always.
It was a joke around the
A
desk.
media, and I say the word whore with love and affection.
Yes,
for
because
whores.
before we started, I believe you used that same word about yourself.
Yes, media whore. Did I call myself? I pale in comparison to Chuck Schumer.
So one Sunday, Archbishop O'Connor makes an announcement through the whatever the diocesan newsletter is, that he is not going to honor the diocesan social service contracts with the city of New York because of Mayor Koch's executive order barring contractors with the city from discriminating against gays.
The Catholic Church and the Salvation Army.
But as you know,
The Catholic Charity is huge.
There's a huge social service contractor with the city, and so this was a bombshell announcement. And we knew that it was going to be on page one. I came into the office, the Metro editor, weekend Metro editor, a terrific guy named Steve Rago, hands me the story. He said, look, O'Connor said he's going to void all the contracts with the city rather than subject the social diocesan services to this executive order. Go report it out. It had a birth at the top of page one, and I went back to my desk and I thought about it for a moment and returned to Steve's desk and said, you may be aware of some rumors or talk around the newsroom that I'm gay. And he sheepishly said, yes, I have heard that. And I said, well, then you know that I have a vested personal interest in this story. And he said, and Tom, it was one of the highlights of my career at the Times because it was so simple and so straightforward. He looked at me and he said, I know you're a good reporter. I know you'll be fair. Go back to your desk and start working.
Right.
It was like a non-issue for Steve.
Well, history of you, any biography always says ethics, ethics, ethics. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
But it was a bit hard to find people that agreed with the Catholic Church for quotes, right? It was, maybe the Catholic League, Bill Donahue, whatever his name was.
Well, and the Salvation Army, I was able to put that all together.
Now, is this when you started saying writing gay organizations' names?
Well, that came until 1987. There was an absolute prohibition, an actual prohibition in the Times against using the word gay as a synonym for homosexual.
In the style book?
In the style book,
wow.
Yes. In the style book, under G for gay. Do not use as a synonym for homosexual, except, I beg your pardon, except in the case of the names of organizations or in quoted matter.
And so you...
Well, and that... the
guerrilla warfare.
Well, one of the first opportunities I had to engage in a bit of guerrilla warfare was when the sale was announced of the old Maritime Trades High School on 13th Street to the new organization of the Lesbian and Gay Community Services Center. And in a story, the headline was "Sale of Site to Homosexuals Planned."
Oh my gosh.
And I had to use the word homosexual once, but I made the effort to use the names of organizations and quoted matter throughout the story so that the reader was left with the impression of having just seen the word gay. That wasn't, Tom, I should say, simply me being mischievous. It was, in fact, my effort to make the Times sound idiomatic. That by then everyone was saying.
Yeah, homosexual, it was like the kind of word my father choked out when I first told him I was gay.
Precisely. And this is now 1981.
Homosexual, and which, maybe I'll say now with tongue in cheek, something about the homosexuals or something, I mean, it was well past the time. So I was going to ask you, and so now I'm going to ask you, publisher, senior editor, under whose regimes did you work, and who changed things? Who was terrible and who was good?
Well,
editorialize on this, please.
I needn't editorialize either because it's such a matter of public record, but the sea change at the Times occurred under Arthur Sulzberger Jr. He couldn't have been more open. He couldn't have been more welcoming. And here's what he did in the case of my own life. This was still under the regime of the executive editor, Abe Rosenthal. Arthur Sulzberger is not yet the publisher, though he seems to be the publisher apparent. His father is the publisher, and the Sulzberger family that's traditionally been a hereditary passing on of the title. Arthur had heard through a common friend that I was gay, and he took the initiative of taking me out to lunch to say, after the few niceties had been exchanged, because I'm wondering, well, like, why have I been asked to lunch with the heir apparent?
It didn't seem like a date.
It did not seem like a date, though. I will also say, because I've said it to him, he was very cute.
Oh, and so I met him. He was wonderful. The Times Square, bid and everything
Right.
he was involved with. He was very handsome and very nice.
The Ox-Sulzberger family produces some very,
Good
very
genes.
handsome men and some very beautiful women, too. I thought Marion High School High School
And
was...
they're generous to
Oh
the
my
world.
God! I say to people, I realize we're digressing, but I guess that's the nature of a loquacious conversation.
Yes.
I make a point. I'm the curator now. I'm no longer on staff at the Times, but I am the curator of the Museum of Times History.
Called.
And it's called the Museum at the Times. How do you like that?
I love that
Very
title, yes.
straightforward. And I make a point to visitors of stressing at the outset that what makes the Times possible as an institution is that it is family controlled. And that family inculcates in every successive generation the idea that they are stewards of a public trust. And I'm not bullshitting about that. I've seen it, I believe it, and that is what, if any institution is left standing in the wake of the storms of the present and the coming years, it will be the Times, because of that commitment. And because the family, through the ownership structure, still controls, even if it doesn't outright own the New York Times Company.
Yeah, they have the controlling interest.
So casting Arthur already in this very enlightened role. And what he said to me at this lunch was, look, I know you're gay, and I want you to know that this will be no impediment to your career.
Wow.
And notwithstanding Abe Rosenthal's antipathy to homosexuals as the executive editor, once the heir apparent told me that, I could live pretty much without fear. So that it was that much easier for me to say to the Metro weekend editor in 1984, hey, I'm gay, and are you sure you want me to handle this story? Because Arthur had already made it plain that this was not going to be an impediment.
But you got handed the LG AIDS beat also, right?
No, not handed. Jeffrey Schmaltz was one of the leading journalists of the Metro desk, who was totally on a trajectory toward leadership at the Times, a meteoric rise. Jeff was a very, very closeted, but very active gay man as well.
And a lovely person.
And a lovely person, and smart and funny, and just he was headed places, no question about it. He, in, I want to say 1990, by that time he was now the deputy national editor, and one evening, close to deadline, he suffered a seizure in the middle of the newsroom. It was very dramatic. EMT was called in. He was wheeled out on a gurney. Everyone was, because it was the height of deadline, everyone was witness to this and horrified to see it. And after a couple of days and some diagnostic tests, it was he was told he had AIDS. It wasn't, I think, even HIV. He had full-blown AIDS.
And one of the opportunistic infections had impacted his brain.
Exactly.
Exactly. A terrible way to find out.
A terrible way to find out, and one could easily imagine just retreating deeply into oneself at that moment. And Jeff, to his lasting and I would say eternal credit, instead took the opposite tack. He came kind of blazing out of the closet and blazingly public with his identity as someone with AIDS, and turned what was then in that day a death sentence, turned it into the opportunity of a reporting lifetime by covering both the sociology of AIDS and HIV, but also of lesbian and gay life in America. And he was given basically the brief to go do it. And he ran with it energetically. And he also, because of his days of training as an editor, he had a splendid sense, Tom, of what made a front page New York Times story. There are
tons of his byline on the front page.
On the front
Times.
page, yeah. So at his death in 1993, the question was, would the Times continue to designate a reporter to cover these issues? And I seemed to be something of a logical choice as his successor. But it was a long campaign, and the editors were understandably pushing back against identity beats.
AIDS coverage. The Times gets criticized an awful lot about its coverage of AIDS. Was there an internal battle about that? Do you recall?
Very much, and it is to my greatest regret in my 50-year career was that I was not more outspoken in trying to arrest the attention of senior editors to the lack of coverage, even if I weren't doing it, that the Times ought to be paying much more attention. Not so much to the science. I mean, after all, it was Larry Altman's story in July of 1981.
No, the human interest part of it.
But exactly.
But I'm going to give you absolution, because even in the Senate, you got to pick your battles. And if you fight every battle that makes you a one-issue person, then you're a one-issue person. So you got to save it up. Like if you're already using it for LG, I don't know what the B's and the T's, poor people, the left out of those days. But you couldn't do everything, because then that's all you would ever do, ever. So I understand that. Is this the moment? Because it might not have helped. They said, oh, of course he'd say that. You know what I mean? So let it go, because it was an editorial decision really above your pay grade.
It was above my pay grade, but I watched the impact of, and this may be just the way it happens, but it was outside agitators like you coming into the Times.
We demonstrated on that.
Well, and not just demonstrating, but coming in, having meetings with Rosenthal or Gelb or Frankel or Lelyveld. You did a lot of that work, and I don't know whether we...
Well, there was the activism, but there were, I want to say, gay white men. The blessing and the curse of AIDS was it forced the gay community to have a meteoric, exponential, spread, if you will. So there were a lot of high-powered white men, mostly, who had access to executives and high-ranking editors at the Times.
Yes.
I was not one of those people. I was one of those greasy food munching, groundlings that would be marching around outside. No, but but they did have access, which was something that there were gay people that had that kind of access before, but they were forced out of the closet because their friends were dying, and some of them ended up dying as well. So it's part of the history. You were there. Me and Cardinal O'Connor, absolution for you, because you can't do everything, and you might. I don't think you would have been effective. I'm sorry, because you already were doing. You're already too gay.
Well, that's
even though it's not a gay, you know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I appreciate also the idea that that, as you say, of course Dunlap would say that because he's gay.
Right, and. It would be nice if heterosexuals would pick up that fight, you know what I mean? Because that was the other thing, because sometimes you were the lone voice. I know you would actually say something, but again, choosing your battles, because you couldn't always be pointing out homophobia, then you'd be a one-issue reporter.
Right. Just to finish,
please,
a long thought that now has so many brackets and parentheses.
You see how it is with me? That's how it goes.
I succeeded, Jeff, in this so-called beat, and it's another regret of mine, frankly, Tom, because I I did not. Those were giant shoes to fill, and I did not fill them. I did not do the job that I didn't come close to Jeff in the impact that I had, and I think I was also the Times. The Times itself was ambivalent about the whole notion of having sort of a quote unquote gay reporter. So much so that I was not even given a full-time beat. I was at that time.
Metro and
And at that time, yes, no, I was in fact Metro overall, but at that time specifically assigned to the real estate section. So my dossier was half-time real estate, half-time national gay, lesbian, AIDS coverage. And you can't do either job.
I got some more absolution here. So Jeff, he came out as having AIDS in a big way, right?
Yes.
So of course it was going to be big. It's terrible that that's how it was, but that's why it was so outsized, right? But you didn't have an outsized thing. You know what I mean?
No, but what he also had was, just as I said, this terrific sense, and there are great reporters who have it. I didn't, of what constitutes a page one story in the Times.
Yes.
It's a very it's a very peculiar. It's like a chef. You just and you can't transmit it. You can show someone the recipe, but you can't transmit it.
What you know. Architecture became a big thing.
Yes.
Landmarks became a big thing.
Well, the Biltmore actually was launched my career as a landmarks reporter, because it had much of what editors want: drama and conflict and crashing timbers and dumpsters and goons.
Yes. I didn't have time to go back and look at the history of the Times on this issue. I loved the Lollipop Building, the Huntington Hartford Museum building.
Yes.
Loved. In fact, I caused a big scene before community groups, Landmarks West, and all these people got involved in it, because it was one of the very first, as a kid from Queens, one of the very first museums I went to, the Huntington Hartford.
In Hartford.
And I love that building. I understand why it might not be the greatest place to display art, but it was just it was just an example. It was a moment in time when they built that building on an island, right?
Yes.
So what was the Times position? Did you write? Were you involved in that?
I did any number of stories. I tried to keep to Columbus Circle, as it was called, because it had become, the Huntington Hartford Museum had long since moved out. It was designed by Edward
Cultural Affairs.
Henry Geldzahn.
It's all coming back to me too.
In truth,
a homosexual, Henry.
So I've heard.
Oh, I thought he was out.
No, yes.
He was one of Ed Koch's, commissioners.
The first time I heard a mayor or anyone of mayoral sort of rank use a four-letter word, it was at Koch's Christmas party at Gracie Mansion. He was taking a small group of us around the mansion and pointing out the paintings that were on the wall that had all been chosen by Henry. And he sort of, as I recall it, he looked at one and he couldn't make head nor tail of it. And he said, I don't know what this painting is, but Henry tells me what fucking paintings I ought to hang in Gracie Mansion, and I do it. And I thought I'd never heard the word come from a mayor.
And I can't, the number of times that he would have wanted to say F you to people, but he didn't, just about this painting that Henry Geldzahler had chosen. And he went on and did other things. The library, I can't remember. He was a part of the gay arts mafia.
Very much so. But to Columbus Circle,
the Lollipop Building.
When I even made the point, they got the name the Lollipop Building because it had columns around its base that, rather than meet the lintel at a right angle. They flared out into kind of an oval shape, and they did look like a line of lollipops, so much so that the Times architecture critic Ada Louise Huxtable, when she was reviewing the building, described it as a die-cut Venetian palazzo on lollipops.
Wow.
And with that, it gained the name Lollipop.
Well, so she liked the building.
No,
She gave it a nickname.
that was not a compliment.
Oh, it sounded so complimentary to
But
What's
she.
wrong with a palazzo?
but
Who
she-
would want a palazzo?
Well, I think she and the contextualists of the Times argued that this little parcel on trapezoidal parcel on Columbus Circle was not quite the place for a white marble. It was mostly marble, so
course.
it had no window. It just had porthole windows along
Yes.
the edges. I loved it.
But
I-
if the Huntington Hartford, if that family had retained their fortune and not fallen into an abyss of drug addiction and family dysfunction, if they had a lot of money, I bet that would have helped to save it. But they had long ago had to let it.
I was allowed a couple of times by the city to come into the building before it was handed over, as it was eventually, to the
Art and Design, right?
Art and Design. Edward Durrell Stone, who was the designer of the original building, had actually created a surprisingly sophisticated interior, which I didn't appreciate until I was doing these stories and realized that you kind of on a series of ramps, you
Yeah.
moved down through the building. You didn't, as I recall, if you started at the top, you didn't really have to encounter stairs. Not in a way, unlike Guggenheim.
Right.
It was a single spatial experience, yeah.
And
Why not
there was no
preserve
money
it?
in it. I remember the carpets were all crummy and everything by this time. It had just fallen into disrepair. But although the one thing about it is, I went to the JFK school for 3 weeks, and it was a great program. And one of the professors said this expression that could be used from time to time: "The horse is dead, dismount." So, so after the fifth landmark turndown,
Yes.
someone wrote that there was some gay affiliation with the museum. I can't remember what it was. And the people from Landmark West came and met with me with a whole group of homosexuals. And I just said to them, "The horse is dead, dismount." You can't win them all. You're married.
I am, happily.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. How did you meet your husband?
I met my husband through mutual friends, and we.
There's
this
no
was-
Grinder, folks, in those days. Just to be
Oh my
wondering.
God, no.
No Grinder.
No. This was in 1993,
A
and
big year for you.
Yeah.
yes, the wonderful thing about Scott, his name is Scott Bain. He does
I've
work.
met him. He's a lovely person.
He is a
And
lovely
you're devoted
person.
to each other. You can
And
see
he is
that.
the author of a book called A Union Like Ours, which is a joint biography of the Harvard literary scholar F.O. Matheson, who really was the inventor in many respects of American studies in the academy.
My
And,
major, by the way, at Lehigh
well,
University.
then you, I'm sure,
Yes,
know
oh, yeah.
American Renaissance, because it was Matheson who sort of brought together this theory that the 1850s were just this protean period of incredible creative activity in America. The American voice was being formed by gay men like Whitman, like Melville,
And there's agitation in the country in general then anyway.
Oh,
You
my
know,
God,
It was,
yes.
it was
Oh.
movement after movement after movement.
it was the most tumultuous decade. I
Right.
mean, we still may not be quite as tumultuous as the 1850s were.
Right.
The-
Right.
You had the Missouri Compromise, the Dred Scott decision,
yes.
the bloody
Oh, my God.
Kansas. There were
Right.
wars in Kansas
Right.
over whether.
See, Sam, I can be erudite when I have an erudite
You
guest
got
on.
some
Look
stuff.
at that.
Yeah. You know stuff about stuff.
It's not just like trashy
I'm
gossip.
not doubting you. No, you reeled it in this episode. I'm really proud of you.
But eventually, Sam, I'm sure we're going to get around to the question of Joshua Speed.
Let's go there now.
Let's
Can we go
just
there
get it
now?
over.
What is that?
I want to.
Joshua Speed was said to be Abe Lincoln's lover.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Well, Mary had her problems.
She
She's had a resurgence that she never
Yes.
knew was going to happen.
Cola Scola, thank you.
Mhm.
Now, where was I?
We're talking about
Your husband.
your husband.
Scott, I'm sorry,
I want to
Scott.
say you didn't meet in Provincetown. Did you meet in Provincetown? You
No,
had
but we,
Provincetown in common.
but we discovered in Provincetown, one of the things as we got, what I wanted to say was the lovely thing about Scott was that we were friends for about a year before we sparked. And
it's the best.
And we have been together.
Who
for
said I
31
have
years.
feelings first?
I'm the one.
said
I pressed my suit.
And he
Did
was.
you like him immediately?
Yes, yes, but I was more forward. I'm also 15 years his senior, so there was.
I'm always a forward one too. I mean, it's just some people are, some people aren't. You need forward people around like us.
And
I only did that because my first boyfriend. I said, Gary, I think I've developed feelings for you. And I didn't, I thought he was straight. He was bisexual, but he could have slugged me. You know what I mean? So raising the issue of having a physical relationship with someone is a big deal. So good for you.
It's scary.
Yeah. So
And
you meet, you're in different apartments. You're living in separate apartments.
we're living in separate apartments. Then in 2005, Scott gets very, 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 very sick. He is so. We have learned in subsequent years from doctors who are now more candid with us than they were in 2005 that they feared they were very close to losing him. He developed an incredibly rare presentation of Hodgkin's lymphoma called paraneoplastic limbic encephalitis from Hodgkin's disease. And among other terrifying consequences of that was that he lost his short-term memory, and I mean lost it. That he could not hold a thought for more than 5 minutes. It was simply terrifying. And at one point, he was hospitalized for 60 straight days at Mount Sinai. And he himself jokes that the insurance companies plotted to send people in the middle of the night to snuff him out by putting a pillow over his head because of the expenses he was undoubtedly incurring. And though happily his recovery ultimately was pretty robust, it compelled us to move to domicile together for a while out of necessity, and then we realized, oh, this is working for us. Because for a long time, this is now 2005, this is 11 years into our relationship.
Sleepover dates.
There were very much sleepover dates. There was what I called, he originally, when we met, he lived on East 49th Street. And so when I would walk back from his apartment on Sundays to mine at 62nd, between Central Park West and Broadway, I would call that the Trail of Tears. So we began living with one another, and we figured out this is working out okay. And then in 2011, when New York State legalized same-sex,
You're welcome.
Well, we thought we had not planned to marry.
And that's not directed at you or anything.
But-
You're not. There's a class of homosexuals that I want to say that to, but even though you're very special, you're not a entitled, demanding, ungrateful homosexual, of which there are some out there. So anyway, so now I made it possible.
When it
because we were in an early state. Relatively.
We were, yes, indeed, and Scott and I were in Provincetown at Kate Clinton and Irva Shivad's house, and we were watching it. We were watching it streaming on some streaming service was carrying the vote. So we celebrated with them, and then we figured because we bought into the myth of the courageous Republicans, because that. So in any case, Tom, you're going to turn your back on that, and so in 2012. we were married.
And no regrets.
Oh my God, no. No, here's the interesting thing, or for me, is that we went into it for legal reasons. I mean, just because
Right, it makes it easier.
and because of the politics, and we wanted to say thank you and blah blah blah. And then I discovered, oh my God, marriage is an amazing institution. No wonder it's been around so long. It's different. It is different calling Scott my husband, and it's kind of inexplicable, I suppose, to those who don't know it and are suspicious of it, but no regrets whatever, only joy, only joy.
I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I mean, I sincerely am, because it was the choice to get married that was so important. And that
Yes.
people who were, now that I have the choice, of course I'm going to choose it. And I will say that I had been in a long-term relationship. Our relationship was absolutely falling apart. The worst time of our relationship, but Lewis was a trooper, and he came up to Albany so that I didn't look like trash. I actually had someone that looked like I was going to marry. Lovely person, Lewis, but we didn't get married. People thought we did not get married. But we did go down to City Hall, which it was not, they didn't really use City Hall. They used it wasn't the Motor Vehicles Bureau, it was something else. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah,
but
on
for
North
people-
Street. Yeah, there's
North Street for lines of homosexuals getting married. But you had an actual thing, like you had a
Yes, in fact, we, though I am not religious, we were married at the Fourth Universalist Society on Central Park West by the senior pastor, Rosemary Bray, at the time, who was a high school, she and I went to the same high school together in Chicago. She was also at Yale with me, and then she was at the Times with me. So,
Wow.
so Rosemary and I went way back, and we asked her if she would marry us. And she even brought us in for the pre-marriage discussion about how serious.
yes. Are you together on financial
Oh,
and
yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
children, dogs, whatever, yes, very important.
Yes,
And how many people attended?
250.
Wow.
Well, what I should say about that is
That's a big
That
one.
was a big one,
big
yes. Well,
It was
he's a popular guy, I
Yeah.
told you.
Well,
Yeah.
it was completely informal. That was the lovely thing. And that's what, first of all, we,
Covered in the Times,
yes, covered in the Times.
because that means it really happened. If it's in the Times, it happened.
We'll have to tell stories another time about weddings that haven't happened that were in the Times, but that is another day.
Oh no! I used to clip them out, and fundraise off of them. You know, you could tell who was gay because they were whatever living or business with a partner, and then it's gay. You ask them for a check. And so there's a secret. I just gave away a Tom Duane strategy. Anyway, okay.
So we wanted everyone there. Parents, spouses, grandparents, kids. There were lots and lots
And
and
your
lots of kids.
families were both.
My mother and father were both dead, but Scott's mother came down from Maine, as well as one of his aunts. And what we did, we hate long weddings, hate them, my God. So we made our wedding ceremony lasted 17 minutes.
Oh,
And then in the back of the...
he's hired, right?
in the-
Sarah?
in the-
That's great.
In the back of the nave, we had sheet cakes and Martinelli sparkling cider because I said I've been to too many weddings with too many drunks, and we're not going to have that here. And so everyone, after 17 minutes ceremony, everyone went to the back of the church and had cake and cider and
And toasted
it was
you for happiness.
absolutely lovely. And one of the great things, particularly with all these kids around, the publisher came, the executive editor, Jill Abramson, came, the Metro editor came. But the thing that really impressed my colleagues at the Times was that Bill Cunningham came.
Wow.
And impresses you. He was so
Yes.
lovely.
Oh.
But he came, and he would not come as a guest. He photographed. The fact that there were all these kids running around.
He didn't want people to know he was there. He was.
yeah,
I
he just-
would see him in operation.
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
But there was David Halbfinger had two girls in lovely like pink dresses, and Bill was enamored of it. It was just a great day.
And did you know him like to hang out with? Because you had done photo stuff.
Not to hang out, but enough so that he honored us both with his presence, because you can imagine how many wedding invitations Bill Cunningham would have received.
But that's really, really great. Let's push everything for just a moment. You wrote so much stuff about the Trade Center, which was in my district, by the way, on 9/11. But then, the rebuilding and and the stories of the people. A book about houses of worship.
Yes, a guide to every house of worship in Manhattan, past and present.
Which, by the way, people keep trying to tear them down, so at least there's a record of them before they tear them down.
That's
also,
what I was thinking.
Provincetown, you photographed extensively, and you have a book about that.
I do, called Building Provincetown.
And, of course, the Paul Goldberger, you were the photographer for his book.
A book called On Broadway, which is a history of the street all the way from Battery to the Bronx.
Published by
Rizzoli.
Nice.
Yes, the gold standard. There's so much more. We'll have to have you back because we'll talk about we'll get down and dirty with some gossip, because you do have gossip, but you're such a gentleman. I don't know. So forth. All right. Next time, it'll be Talking Trash with David Dunlap. Now, I want to thank you so much for coming on.
What a pleasure to talk with you and to meet you, Sam.
And I wasn't even that loquacious. I got, I kept.
You reeled it in.
Reeled it in.
Yeah, you were very well behaved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. Thank you.
This has been You Don't Say, Conversations with the Loquacious Mr. Duane, featuring former New York State Senator Thomas Duane and former Professor Blake Newham Valenzuela. We are produced by Sound Smoke at PNT Network on Orchard Street. Associate producers are Neil Patrick Connolly, Angel Newham Valenzuela, and Charles Sanchez. Music by Notice. We are sponsored by Tom Duane Strategies and the Ghost of the Future, with the support of the Gay Officers Action League, a fraternal organization of the NYPD, Immigration Equality New York, and the Victory Fund, as well as our sister television media, The Recruiters, streaming worldwide on Manhattan.